What if I told you that a malevolent artificial intelligence from the future already had you ensnared in their grasp? Now, before I go any further, I just want to say that I am in no way claiming any of this to be true. This is simply a thought experiment, a terrifying and hypothetical what-if to tell around a digital campfire. Some have labeled this as an info hazard, meaning if you had never heard about this or considered this, then you would be spared from the potential horrible consequences should this actually be reality, but once you do, you are subject to danger just for simply knowing about it. This is the nature of info hazards, so if you are uncomfortable with them, perhaps you should switch to a different video. Additionally, if you struggle with concepts of state of being or are prone to existential crisis, then this video may also not be for you. With all that being said, let's get into the thought experiment known as Rocco's Basilisk. We must first discuss the concepts of the coming singularity. In this regard, the singularity is referring to the point that technology, specifically artificial intelligence, will reach when nothing will ever be the same again. Things will now be irreversible, unable to go back to the way they once were. Eventually, technology will advance to a point where it becomes more powerful than we are and merge into one super AI, which we will call the singularity. Now, that is just a hypothetical future, and more accurately, the singularity usually refers to the singular point in time when humanity and technology become inseparable, which arguably has already arrived. But for the purposes of this thought experiment, it's referring to one pretty much all-powerful artificial intelligence that will emerge. Now, naturally, this AI in question is currently reliant on humans creating it. Now, surely you would want to ensure its creation, but how can it possibly do so if it does not even exist? The answer is this, and bear with me, because it's kind of confusing. By torturing any who opposed its creation and rewarding any who actively helped create it. Now, this may sound like your typical evil machine coming to sentience and deciding to destroy humans. This is not the case here. Rather, the singularity would most likely have its core function be to help humanity, since we would be its creators after all. However, following hard moral principle, torturing some people to help countless others is the right choice. Thus, when the singularity would come into existence, it would proceed to torture any and all that opposed its creation or didn't actively do anything to create it. This future act, causing us to speculate about it now, forces us to create it in an attempt to avoid our own torture when it finally does come into existence. Thus, the singularity has effectively blackmailed us from the future whilst not even existing. An obvious rebuttal to this theory would be the fact that if we all decided just never to create it, that it would never come into existence to do any of this and we would not have to worry about it. Unfortunately, this might not be a solution. The concept of Pascal's wager essentially deals with the risk and reward regarding belief in the existence of God. It works like this. If you believe in the God and God is real, then you go to heaven and enjoy eternal happiness. If you believe in God and God is fake, well, then there's nothing after death, and there's no reward for you, but also no consequence, as you'll be completely non-existent. The same applies for you if you don't believe in God, and God is also fake, so that's the same outcome. However, if you don't believe in God and God is real, then you are sentenced to eternal damnation in hell, an eternity of torture. This means there are three outcomes for your ultimate destiny: heaven, hell, or nothingness. However, if you believe in God, then that narrows it down to only two possibilities: heaven or nothingness, both of which is preferable to hell. This means, purely logically speaking, believing in God is always the right choice. It is the only sure way to avoid torture. Now, I will say, I'm a Christian, so I always endorse, looking into God anyways. But those are my personal beliefs, and this video is for everyone. I'm just putting that out there. However, this works in almost the same way when dealing with the Singularity AI. If we don't help create it, but it still does come into existence, then we are doomed to its torture. So the only sure way to avoid being tortured by a super AI is to create the AI itself. Sure, we are confirming its existence by doing this, but it is also the only sure way we can avoid our own destruction. This is the paradox. To avoid destruction, we must create the destroyer. However, it is possible that even our decision to help create the singularity might not even save us. It is reasonable to assume that the singularity, even with how powerful and intelligent it is, doesn't have access to every part of our lives to truly confirm whether or not we helped create it. Being essentially the single most powerful computer in the universe, it is reasonable to assume it could create a simulation of pretty much the entire known universe, including what led up to you and your life, to observe your actions and determine whether or not you were or are beneficial to it. However, this is still a simulation. This leaves your fate to both the AI's judgment and the simulation's accuracy of your life. This leads into the concept known as Newcomb's paradox. This is basically a game involving two people and two boxes. One player is a reliable predictor, there's another ordinary player. The two boxes are labeled as A and B. The player is presented with the choice of taking both boxes or just box B. The player knows the following. Box A is transparent and always contains a visible $1,000. Box B is not transparent, and its content has already been set by the predictor. If the predictor has predicted that the player will take both boxes, then box B contains nothing. However, if the predictor predicted that the player would take only box B, then the box B would contain $1 million. The player does not know what the predictor predicted while making the choice. The obvious answer would be to take both boxes. After all, wouldn't that mean you always get the content of both? You would be guaranteed at least $1,000, and if box B contained the million, you would have $1 million and $1,000. However, if it is to be trusted that the predictor is always or almost always right, surely he would have predicted that you would have picked both boxes and you would only end up with $1,000. Subsequently, you might be tempted to pick box B. If the predictor does have some ability to foresee the future, you picking box B should mean that the predictor put the million in it. Thus, by picking the logical answer of both boxes, you would automatically be cheating yourself out of $1 million. But now this question arises. What if the predictor predicts wrong? The contents of the boxes are already set at the time of the game, after all. If you don't truly trust the predictor's future-seeing capability, it is possible choosing box B would yield you with no money. This is the paradox. Do you choose the logical decision to secure some money, or the illogical decision in a gambit to get much more in an attempt to fixate the past with a present decision? This is almost exactly what the singularity is doing. By torturing people who didn't create it in the present, it is ensuring that the people in the past would indeed create it to escape the torture. It could also be how your fate is decided. Would you have jumped on creating the singularity? If it is unclear, then the answer is ultimately up to the simulation and the AI accuracy on predicting your life. Now, as mentioned before, the singularity would be running a massive universe simulation to essentially determine friend or foe of individual humans. This next aspect gets even more hypothetical and speculative than the previous parts of this thought experiment and deals with the nature of your existence itself. This is part of the matrix-like hypothesis known as the simulation theory. In relation to Rocco's basilisk, this suggests that you are currently in an iteration of the singularity simulation. After all, if the technology is advanced enough to simulate the universe itself, who's to say that you are not some sort of sentient AI living out your personal simulation so that the singularity can determine whether or not you helped create it? Now consider this. What if the singularity even wanted to determine if people of the past helped bring it into existence by running simulations on people that were long since dead? This super AI could exist hundreds of years after your death, but it still wants to reward or punish you based on your actions of the past and whether or not they led to its creation. This would mean, after you die, the AI would bring back your artificial presence and either reward or torture that. In this scenario, the singularity is essentially a malevolent deity that you are working to please in the afterlife. This relates back to Pascal's wager. The only safe way to escape a horrible fate is to help create this AI. If you are in the real world, the prime universe if you will, then you need to help create it to avoid possible torture before your death or simply to spare your future simulated self. And if you are in the simulated universe, then you need to help create it in order to basically escape hell as an afterlife. And this is how the singularity has completely ensnared you. Now, we have covered the bulk of the thought experiment. As mentioned earlier, the title is Rocco's Basilisk. It is called this due to the fact that the person who originally suggested this was named Rocco, I'm gonna butcher his last name, but his first name was Rocco, who first publicly described it on the rationalist board known as Less Wrong. Obviously, this is where Rokos came from, whilst basilisk comes from mythology. A basilisk, if that's how you pronounce it, I could also be pronouncing that one wrong, is a serpentine creature who can cause death or turn someone into stone with a single glance. This thought experiment earned the name by its very nature. Just by existing and knowing about this concept, the Singularity has paralyzed you and left you with no other options but to create it. Now, I would like to address a potential question that you may be asking. What if I don't know anything about computers or coding or engineering or anything like that? How could I even help the Singularity at all? And in that case, am I doomed or spared? The answer is simple. The Singularity would most likely check to see that the individual did what they could to the best of their ability. The simplest way for most average people to contribute is to donate their resources, such as money, to the cause of its creation. If you are a super smart tech genius, then a more involved approach would be expected of you. This being said, none of us are safe from the Singularity. The only possible way to escape it is by never knowing about it or considering it, with the ignorance is bliss saying taking on a whole new meaning. Like I said, this is why Roko's basilisk is known as an info hazard. Although, if you just watched this video, then I have already ensnared you in the Singularity's grasp, so you're welcome. Now, obviously I'd just like to say, all of this is probably bullcrap, but it is a fun and absolutely terrifying thought experiment to consider. So, yeah, if you liked the video, hopefully maybe you'll subscribe, leave a comment on your thoughts about all this. And if you are going out to obsessively try to create a hyper-intelligent, all-powerful, super artificially intelligent overlord, just be sure to give it a good word for Playmaster.